Well, welcome back to the crash course. After discussion in class today, it was clear that I owe you a bit of a catch-up about source control in general and Git in specific. So what is source control? Here I have an example. I have two developers named Alice and Bob, and they're gonna collaborate on a project. They share the project through what is called the repo. So the repo is something that exists on a centralized server, and they're going to use this centralized server to, stay up to date. You can imagine that was just literally a server where they upload their files as they change them. Here's our repo, and the first thing that we do is Alice is going to do a clone or a pull of the repo. That just means go to the server and give me a copy of what's on there. So Alice now has on her local hard drive an exact copy of what was found on the server moments ago. Alice then makes a change. She edits the file. So now the original just said return 0, but now she's added this printf on here, hello world. She's done that edit locally, she's built it, she's run it. She's happy, that's good. She's ready now to share that with Bob. They say, hey Bob, I added some code. How does she do that? She does that through a commit. Actually, in Git, there's a two-step process. In other forms of source control, that might be just a single process where you commit the changes directly to the server. In Git, we will commit the changes. That says record that locally as a change, and you get to put a little annotation of what you did. A little summary goes there, and then once that is done, you can push it up to the server. And so now, once Alice has done her push, the repo has an exact copy of what Alice has. In Git, the commit itself only happens on Alice's local hard drive. The push is required to get it up to the server. So let's have Bob join in the fun. Bob now does his clone or his pull. He will clone the repo, and what he finds now, since Alice has already come and done her work, this is what's on there at this time, so he gets an exact copy of what Alice did. That's all good. Bob is going to make his edit. And he commits his edit, but Alice doesn't see that yet, and the repo doesn't see that yet until Bob does a push. He pushes the change that he made up to the repo, and now the repo sees it. The repo's got that change. Alice still does not have that change yet. To get that change, Alice must do what's called a pull. Alice will deliberately, she will choose her options to pull from the server, and when she does that, she'll get that update, and now everybody is in sync. Where this is important for us, even though you're only one user, you don't really need to share a lot of code. You will be using it to share with us, the grading team. Your graders will be pulling whatever's on your repository on the GitHub cloud, up on the server. And so when you clone and you commit, even your commits, that is only going to affect what's on your local hard drive. Until you push it, we don't see any changes at all. If you want your code to be graded, you're going to have to push. Don't forget to push your code. Now that's up on the server and we can grade it. Let's take a look at what the server looks like. Here we are on the GitHub website itself. GitHub is a server that can hold our Git repos for us, and that's what we're doing here. So let's go to the Hello World one. Let's see. Here we go. Here is my repo as it stands at this moment. This is the master server copy of what's in Hello World right now. If you wanted to make a clone of this, you could go here, hit this button, and this is the address of where you can get this clone, or you can use the SSH format for that. and there's even a button to open it directly in GitHub Desktop if you're using GitHub Desktop. Or you can just download what's on there. Just download the raw files without the Git links. What else can we see on here? We can see that there have been 8 commits in total to the history. This is one of the things I want to stress about source control. Git is one version of source control. There's several different types of source control, but they all serve the same general purpose, which is to keep track of the changes and to help you coordinate changes amongst an entire team. So let's take a look at these 8 changes. So click that, and that brings up the history, and we can see how things have progressed over time. In April, there was an initial commit, suspiciously another initial commit on May 31st, and then 3 commits in June here. We added some more demos, a little cleanup, fixed build settings, another commit here in June, and then 2 commits on August 21st. So this is the history that went down, and when you do a commit, it asks you for a little summary of what you did, and this is that summary. The summary appears there so that you can remind yourself what this was about. And particularly this comes in handy when you're looking back to something that you messed up back in the past. You can go back and say fixed build settings, for example. Let's say you remember that you did something to the build settings and you think maybe you messed that up. Let's take a look at exactly what did I do. What did I do back in June 18th? We'll just click it, and it will show us the files that we messed with, the file I messed with here, and all the changes that were made. So apparently these 2 lines were deleted and these lines were added. Okay, so that's what that looks like, and that's what that's for. And you can take it further. You can actually restore this version. You can go back in time and restore old versions. You can pull individual changes, all kinds of things like that. Let's take a look at a few other clients for Git. Git itself is sort of just the protocol for how we're going to do this. And there's a command line version, and there's also lots of GUI clients that you can get and choose. I will start with the one that we sort of suggest in class is this GitHub Desktop, and the reason we suggest it is because it's integrated with GitHub. We are using GitHub. So it will look something like this. When you make a change, it will automatically appear here. You can commit it. You have to add a little summary and then hit a commit, and then you'll get the option to push over here. Let's pull just to make sure we're up to date. Okay, we are now up to date. Let's take a look at that history tab in GitHub Desktop. Shows that same sequence of things, and you can browse them. You can see like the initial commit only contained the git ignore and the readme file. And then the next thing, which I also called initial commit, actually contained the assets and so forth. Let's look at that fixed build settings again. That's the same thing we just looked at. And here's what it looks like in GitHub Desktop. As far as other clients, the most popular one that you find out there amongst professional developers is honestly just the command line. So the base command line Git, you might look something like this. Let's look at that same thing. Git log shows the history of everything that has happened over time. You can see those here. You can see the commit number and the date and who did it and their little comment on here. And you can do all the things that you can do through the GUI. You can do it through the command line. Let's show some more. Show the rest of it. You can do everything through the command line. You can do, git commits, git pushes, branching and cloning and all of that. I will plug one other thing, which is the one I actually use, is Tortoise. Tortoise Git is an extension for the browser. As you can see here, I can right click and my Tortoise Git options appear right here. And here is what the log looks like. That same log looks like for that same thing. And let's look at that same change. In Tortoise Git, I like the look of it. I like the layout. We can see that fixed build settings change that I made back in June and the files that were modified, and there they are. And what we can do here is then compare and say, what did I do on that day? And this is the way this one presents it to me. It shows me what the file used to have in it, and then what the file has in it when it's done. And you can see those side by side there like that. I kind of like this format. Only available for Windows though. Mac users would have to choose something else. Whereas Github Desktop is available for Mac and PC. Okay, so that's the crash course of Git and source control in general. There's a lot more to cover in source control that we're not going to get to in this class. How to resolve conflicts when two people on the team modify the file at the same time. That's something that source control will help you deal with. And how to make what's called branches, where you can go off and with your subgroup and do a separate task that another group is doing. In this class, we are just teams of one, so we shouldn't have to worry about any of that more advanced stuff. It's good enough that we just get a little practice with the basic Git features. And those basic Git features I'm going to want you to know are: how do I clone a repo? How do I commit my change? How do I push my change? How do I pull that change onto another machine? How do I look at the history of the file to see what has changed when? And then last, I think it might come up once in a while, how do I go back to an older version because I screwed something up? Okay, so that's it for source control, and we'll see you in the next one.